land in the dirt. How do you keep going? How do you keep going? Yeah.
Yeah,
So large focus on resilience today. Yeah.
that's our day
Yeah.
today.
That's the day.
That
And
is,
how
that's
do
the
you
day.
develop it? How do you curate it? And because stuff will happen, guaranteed.
Yeah, it's that age-old law. The tighter the plan, the more detailed it is, the more God laughs at us.
Yep.
So, so I'm gonna we promised slides, so we got
Promise.
slides for today. I'm gonna
Not a lot. Not a lot.
not a lot. 64.
Yeah, that's
We
not a
should
lot.
be
That's about
70
one a minute.
maybe slides today. We should be good. There's that. I had to chuckle yesterday because there's the old adage, if I have slides, I must show them. So I remember in my youth working with the CIO for LAPD and being in the room and having a system engineer insist on showing him every slide he had ever created. So
Yeah.
that stuck in my head. So we will not be doing that today. Um, just kind of as we're getting ready to get started, yesterday was a enjoyed the conversations yesterday. Any thoughts on things that you took away, things that aha moments overnight, kind of lessons that may have, gold nuggets that you've taken that you want to anybody want to share this morning, and then we'll kind of dive right into resilience. Don't make me call on you.
I'll just jump in here. Just the routine of everything everything that we learned is important to spur imagination. I feel that you have to honor the process.
Mm, good, good
Yeah.
observation. That's true. The process works. I mean, if you take a snapshot in time, well, I mean, the metaphor here is airliner flying from San Francisco to Tokyo is off course 93%, 97% of the time. Yeah. So if you take a snapshot at any period in time there, the likelihood is you're going to look at it and go, uh-oh, yeah, this isn't working. Now you trust the process. You trust the process. This is just what it looks like as we navigate from here to there.
On our way to success. Yeah. Yeah, it was a broad topic yesterday when we talk, it's a lot to think about from the model, the ACT model, the ACCCT model, all of the pieces. And then kind of that, and Sam, you were talking a little bit yesterday around, your transformation and things that have gone on that, kind of that evaluation. So it was a kind of a good place to start. And I also mentioned I had done the same thing earlier that morning, kind of thinking I'm frustrated with a couple things. Let me go look at where I'm at, and it's just a good opportunity to use that tool periodically, and you'll see more about that on Friday when we give you a handout on here's kind of some places you may want to do that. So on that, Elaine,
That,
I don't want to cut you out, Elaine or Armin. Any thoughts you want to add about yesterday, or glad you're here with us, Elaine?
Thanks. Yeah, it was really interesting to go through the exercise and then look at it again this morning. And the one thing I thought I was so strong in, no, I can always improve in all of it. But for me, I thought, oh, I've got communication mastered. No, no.
yeah.
But I'm very excited because reading through especially the second worksheet where you put the pillars against the act.
Side by side.
Yeah, that really helped me a lot. So
Good.
Oh, good.
I'm excited.
Good.
Love it.
You're the first one that helped, so I'm glad. All right. Um, I'm gonna do what we do, and
Sure.
I'm gonna share my screen.
Let there be a slide.
We're
There was
going
a
right
slide and
to
it
it.
was good.
Let's go right to it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna get on a soapbox on this one today, but yeah, I do want to just illustrate that what we're looking at here is going from command and control, yeah, motivation exclusively, carrot and stick to get things to move, to get people to do things, all that kind of stuff. What we're looking at here is a far more elegant model. Influencing, which is state of being, you cause movement just by your presence. So that
Mhm.
invites you to take a look at, okay, how am I showing up? And that is a very key component to this. How am I showing up? And before I open my mouth, people start to move. So influencing others in order to co-create. So part of that showing up is an invitation for people to actually engage with the idea, not just comply with the idea, but to actually engage with it. What's in it for me? What do I get to have, do, or be if we did this thing? That's where the co-creation begins, is when people begin to answer that question. What do I get to have, do, or be? Because we're doing this, or we're targeting that. So that becomes partly, this is where meaning starts to develop here, which the coordinated movement piece, when you're causing movement, you're going to step on each other's toes, and you want to encourage appropriate conflict in an organizational context. Appropriate conflict. Tell me more about what you say there. I hear your objection to that. What's underneath that? What are we missing that you're seeing? I mean, those sorts of questions invite people's participation, and it invites them to actually, more frequently push back on something, so that you've got greater clarity about really what are we doing. Okay. So conflict is a very useful tool. Most leaders shy away from it because they don't understand how to use it. Okay. So the last piece here has to do with the pursuit of a worthy ideal. And this really is, I mean, you can put vision in there, but it has to be a worthy vision, something that actually inspires. And this is where you move from motivation to inspiration, that worthy ideal, which in part, kind of feeds back into that whole co-creation component. What's in it? What do I get to have, do, or be? Why is it worthy of me? I'm investing my time, and I get paid for it, but I'm investing my time and my energy. I don't get to recoup either one of those. So it had better be a good investment, something that is worth my life force being dedicated to that outcome. When you start framing things in that way, you really tap into inspiration in a very fundamental way. And inspiration it's got a long tail. Motivation's got a very short tail. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's our leadership model. And we've got the two, and the for the sake of what here actually is this. It's not your vision, goals, or objectives, and
Right.
we separate this out, the word pursuit of a worthy ideal and the for the sake of what. They're actually, it's a hand in glove scenario. But we want to separate it out for the sake of understanding. It's, just simply having a vision is not enough. When I was working with Nokia, as an example, the telephone giant way back when, I started working with them in the 1990s, mid 1990s, when they were still a conglomerate. They were selling rubber boots and tires and cables and television sets and farming implements and all kinds of things. And when they made a shift to becoming a pure telephony play. I remember having a conversation with Jorma Ollila, who was the CEO of the company at the time. And, in the process of doing this, is mid 1990s, I said, "What's the vision?" And she said, "Well, we've got one." And they had done work with Michael Hammer out of Harvard, for looking at strategic initiatives, and they had formulated a vision. But what was interesting about the vision, when I asked them what it was two words, Vision 2000. And when Yorma said that, he said, "Here, what's your vision?" I said, "It's Vision 2000." I said, "What the hell does that mean?" And he said, "Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly." He wanted people to begin to define and to be challenged to define the meaning in it for them. Now, the strategic initiative filled in a whole lot of blanks. We're, part of the objective here, when we started looking at strategic initiatives and outcomes, number one reseller, or number one telecom provider, in the world. Now, this was mid 1990s. Motorola had that role at that point in time. By 1998, 1999, they were the number one seller of handsets, mobile handsets in the world. And not only number one handset reseller, but they also sold more cameras than anybody else in the world because they were embedded in the phones. So, Vision 2000, what does it make possible? And this is the key to this. What does it make possible? Why does it matter? Why does it matter? What does it make possible? And people move towards possibilities. And that's where inspiration actually provides the juice to create a possibility. So possibility goes into probability. Probability gets handed off to the management team. They work with it and execute on it, and it becomes a reality. The leader's role primarily is to create, formulate, curate possibility in people's minds. What's possible? So that's, kind of the for the sake of what, wrap.
That's a good wrap.
That's a good wrap.
That's a good wrap. But I think it's important, the reason why we show these two so there's different dynamics we'll talk about with these two slides every day. But I think one of the important things, in particularly about for the sake of what, is that question around possibility, because that's the feed for inspiration. We're inspired by what's possible. We're not motivated by what's possible.
Yeah.
Motivation's an intrinsic thing.
Yeah. And that actually, when we're looking today at resilience,
That's
when,
important for
when you
today.
have something like this in place, being able to, get knocked down 9 times and stand up 10, becomes something that is just an of course. Okay. I can't not move in this direction. I can't not keep going. Yeah. It's, that's where resilience actually begins to show up. Yeah.
Right.
It's that. Yeah. Here's a definition to play with. When you think about how do you sustain success in life, you have to understand the definition, right? Yeah. And the way that we define sustainable success is it's about developing the capacity to continuously start over. That's how you create sustainable success as an individual, as a team, and as an organization. You develop the capacity to continuously start over. And that capacity building is something that, we can actually play with. When we talk about capacity, what are we talking about? Well, it's all fundamentally rooted in mindset. Yeah. Yeah, just the understanding about, how we hold mistakes, how we hold failure, how we talk to ourselves. There's how I describe something determines how I feel about it, which generates my behavior. So what keeps me going? That's what we're going to be looking at today.
Yeah, that's a really important part of today's conversation. We've talked about these models the last couple of days, and we lean on these models, and in particularly today, we're really focusing, and Blaine and I talk about, do I get to talk about Leadership Universe? You want to flip it today?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's flip it today. So in the Leadership Universe, we really are going to be leaning in today on mindset and spirit soul, on those two layers. And that's the layers, as Blaine mentioned early on in the week. And on Monday, Elaine, when we were together, when Blaine and I worked together, the how, what, why we spend time with, and there's obviously areas where we have to spend time with clients, but we really focus in mindset, spirit, and soul. That's the area where our work occurs. And there's a little bar. I think you could probably see my mouse pointer that sits right here, that is called imagination.
Yep.
And today we're going to spend a little time talking about this little bar here, in particularly with resilience and leading through change. And then again, the 4 pillars we spoke to yesterday. We're going to dive into kind of the almost all of the 4 pillars today, just from all of the components with resilience.
Yeah.
So
So yeah, and just real briefly on this, when we're playing in these two domains, mindset and spirit, that tends to be unfamiliar terrain for many
oh boy,
people. Yeah, it's kind of like, well, just tell me what to do. Well, I'm not going to do that. We need to explore here because you need to
yes,
own what we're doing in a way that makes sense.
yes,
So trust and autonomy. Ultimately, what we end up doing, if everything has worked well, not didn't work right or didn't work wrong, but worked well, is we begin to develop in ourselves and in our people the experience that I can act. Yeah, there's agency that comes into play here. I don't wait to be told what to do. So I trust myself to handle the consequences of delegation. I trust myself if I'm being delegated to. I trust myself to be able to push back and say no, because if my boss hands me my head on a platter, I want to be able to have some autonomy here about how I actually deal with it and work with it. So all of this takes place when we're exploring mindset, because we're really kind of, unbundling belief systems, and people
Right.
get real attached to their belief systems, real attached to their belief systems. Communication and transparency. Um, Another way of talking about this has to do with framing from a leadership perspective, framing what you're doing in the envelope of authenticity. Yeah. Who's showing up here? And this kind of literally goes back to that whole notion of leadership presence, influencing, communication and transparency. I communicate and effectively when I'm being transparent. That doesn't mean I'm throwing the kimono open and just saying, yeah, you get everything.
No.
But I'm imbuing it with meaning. Communication, Virginia Satir, family psychologist, family therapist, had a definition for communication that was just elegant. It's the ways, plural, the ways we work out common meaning with one another. The ways we work out common meaning with one another. So communication mastery is organized around that definition. Are we getting common meaning in place here? And yeah, and and we're looking at transparency here. Just, you as a leader are going to make you're making the decision. Yeah, you are making decisions in your organization. You're making decisions with your teams. But people have to understand what went into that decision-making process. That's the transparency piece. It's not just by fiat. It's kind of like, well, here's why we did this. You may not like what we did, but here's why we did this. And they go, okay, meaning, I get it. Okay. You had access to information that I didn't have, and I understand how it all fits together. Don't agree with it. And, they don't have to buy in the sense of agreeing that they like it, but they have to buy in the agreement around, I'm going to go ahead and do this. This is where commitment comes into play here, which is where systems of accountability are actually rooted. When people say yes to something, the ability to hold them and for them to hold others on the team accountable. You said yes. And here, one way to think about this is every activity in an organization can be thought of as links in a chain that produces a result. Every yes is a link in a chain that ends up with this result. And if the yes is broken, you lose connection to that result. So part of what we're looking at here is leaders actually paying attention to, in the way that you identified this, Sam, to the process, managing the commitments, not managing the result. And that's how you actually lead change, is you manage and lead people to high quality yeses. You manage the conversation there, manage the promises, which leads to growth and innovation. And Dolan had spoken about that little line between mindset and spirit. Carl Jung, again, I'm going to quote him
Yeah.
here. Without the play of the imagination, nothing of consequence has ever been produced. He also said, imagination lives at the threshold of spirit. Imagination lives at the threshold. It's the gateway into creativity, into innovation, which is what spirit actually translates into. So these four pillars, they are incredibly robust when we really work them in the mindset area, and they give you some pretty good guardrails.
There you go. So let's get into why does today's conversation matter?
Dive.
Dive, dive.
But before we jump in there, just real quick, if I
Go
could,
ahead.
just we touch on this, and we have touched on these things the last 3 days. Assumption I'm making is that it's beginning to land in different ways. Some of the ways
Yes.
we describe the leadership universe in the four pillars, and also the definition of leadership. How is it landing for you right now? And I guess landing, I'm gonna, what utility are you seeing for yourself with your organizations, with your teams, in how you're running your business, as you begin to get greater understanding of the universe, the pillars, and the definition of leadership itself, particularly through the ACCCT model.
Good question.
Just kind of toss that out. Don't want to leave anybody behind here. That's why we're checking in.
I'll go first.
Okay, Sam.
Well, for me, my organization is very small. It's anywhere from 2 to 6 employees, but
Sure.
dormant the case. But for me, what I'm taking away, and it's reading, is the importance of my interpretation of my own personal reaction to events, barriers, or whatever thought process, and how I interpret it and how important that is for myself to be at or comfortable and clear and aware of why I'm reacting the way I'm reacting to anything, so that I can, set a path first for myself, but then, a clear path for whatever it is I'm communicating, or so that's sort of in today's conversation. It's very, very important to understand your barriers, your mindset, and almost tear it down. I don't mean that in a destructive way, but make
Sure.
sure that you have a very clear path, so that you can be aware, so that you can act.
Good. Thank you.
Armin or Elaine?
Well, you don't have to have anything.
I'm really excited about this conversation today. I'm working for the Department of Agriculture and the Forest Service. It's a huge organization. My immediate sphere is a few tens of people, in my ranger district, but we're going through some incredible, I'll use incredible in place of a lot of other words that bubble up for what's going on in the agency right now. I've decided not to take any of these early out offers. I'm committed and sticking to it to the end. But to say that we're going through changes daily, if not hourly, is an understatement. So I'm excited to see what kind of
Good.
food for thought here is. You're bringing up and some tools. And some of this stuff, it's already starting to resonate. Like, okay, yeah, that's in alignment with how I felt or reacted. And I've been mostly okay. I've made a decision. A lot of this crap is beyond my control. It's not worth getting wrapped around the axle. Focus on my mission.
Perfect. Keep your focus. When we're going to talk about that a little bit later today, keeping focused on the mission.
Yeah.
Okay. Elaine, anything at all? It's fine if you don't. That's fine.
You're on that side of my screen. That's why I'm pointing over there.
That's all right, because I've got your documents over here, and that's why I've been looking. For me, I'm having this realization with my one business that I went from me and a half of a support person to I have 3 directs now, and then I have a secondary team of 11 people, and then another team of 15 people that are all looking to me to make, decisions, provide guidance, and all of this. And I keep thinking back when you said about, fall down 9 times, get up 10. That's what this business has felt like. But now all of a sudden I've got all these people. I won't say they're depending on me, but they're looking to me for that guidance, that direction, that leadership. And in a moment, it scares that out of me, but I'm learning to listen to them and make those decisions. Because Sam, you talked about creatives. Okay, my business is in the tattoo industry. Try working with tattoo artists. Let's talk about ultimate creatives. Boy, and it's fascinating what's happening. And I'm all of a sudden I'm kind of like evolving. I'm going, well, I guess I am a leader. I'm like, no, I just started this company, right? No. I'm a leader. And the resilience piece. Oh yeah, we've had some things where I've fall down hard, get back up. But now it's teaching other people because they've had issues where they've stumbled or fallen. And I know that what their value is to what we're doing as an organization and to themselves. And so resilience, something I absolutely love.
Good.
I absolutely love. It's painful, but I love it. So I'm excited about this.
This will be a good conversation today. Yes, so immediately wanted to like reveal my tattoos, but I won't. So more than anybody wants to know. Other
Nobody
than
wants.
I have one on my hand right here. That's a tattoo. So
Okay.
I was told if I want out, I have to cut the finger off. Um, just how it works.
That's just
So
how it works. It's
how it works. Let me go back. I'll share my screen again.
yeah,
Let's do this.
that's
Might want to get that M13 erased off there.
yep.
Fair shot. All right. So why this matters? We're gonna. I'd rather, we've all agreed that this conversation matters, right? It's just resilience. When there's change, it creates uncertainty. There's decision making that happens under pressure. Team stability and trust is important, Elaine, as you're doing, and as you're all leading teams, regardless of the size. You're leading team, and you're accountable to those individuals. So there is a very important component with stability and trust. How do you do that? And then sustainable performance, which goes back to
The
the definition
definition.
of success, right? When we go back to that sustainable capability to start over and do that every day. So I want to we'll get into the conversation here a little bit. So what we wanted to start really with you. And these are the points on this slide, and you guys will all get all of this, and there's a couple of worksheets that we're going to go through here in just a few minutes. But I think you've all kind of leaned into this conversation around reframing setbacks as strategic insights. I think one of the tricks that happens in a leader's mind is when things don't go the way we anticipated they would. And generally by that, I'm talking about a negative outcome. It didn't go as good as we thought it was going to go. And we probably have never had that happen in any of our careers, but things didn't go quite as good. We view that as we can look at it as a setback, and we have a tendency to step away from that setback and internalize it. I'll be specific, right? I have a client who internalizes setbacks, and she views them as personal. I let the team down. And it becomes, and it's a relative constant conversation around the mindset of setbacks are going to occur. One of the evidences of setback is that opportunity for it's an indication that you're on the path.
Mhm.
We've all heard the analogies of, when you run into boulders, go around them, through them, over them, under them. That boulders are it's going to happen. But it's an indication that you're on the path. But think about setbacks, and Blaine talked a little bit about this yesterday when we were talking about the word context. And we're going to get more into context tomorrow when we talk about leading through change, which is kind of that arc of starting with vision to action. But when you're thinking about reframing setbacks, it is that opportunity for us to stop. And Elaine, you said it, right? And Blaine touched on this a little earlier. It's the Zen statement of fall 6, rise 7, or fall 8, rise 10, whatever the number you happen to put behind it. In Japanese, it's called kaizen, which comes from a well-published book out there called The Toyota Way. If you ever pick a book on kaizen and constant change, pick up the book called The Toyota Way. But it is that opportunity to step back and look at it empirically and think through what am I learning from this? What is the data that I'm taking away from this that I can learn? And then how do I use that to sharpen my skills as a leader, to either, because it's going to happen again. There's other outcomes that you're not going to get to. So how do I use this as my opportunity to sharpen my skills, my instincts, my 3 pieces of intelligence, my mind, heart, gut, intuition, and my imagination, the 4th part, to be smarter and be able to recognize this going forward. So one of the things I think as a leader is when we look at resilience, is we have a tendency to internalize a missed outcome. I listened to a piece of a podcast this morning. Blaine and I have been talking lately about the CEO of Delta Airlines. And I listened to a podcast from a little bit, a snippet from a podcast with him this morning. And one of the things he was talking about was this topic, but from the topic of also evaluate successes and reframe successes and think of them from a data standpoint. What is it that we did that was better than we thought it was going to be? And analyze that data and use that data. So it's really an event that occurs, whether it's a setback, and here we're talking about it from a resilience perspective, or a strategic insight as you're moving forward and scaling your business, growing your business. Evaluate it from that perspective so that you sharpen your saw.
Yep. Yeah, one of the ideas on this reframing setbacks, and again, put this in the framing of mindset, this internal, and you just
Yep.
spoke about this, Dolan. Most people will internalize setbacks. Yeah, yeah. I stubbed my toe. I didn't do it right. Those sorts of things. That internal
Yep.
conversation is the one thing that has the potential to really derail if you're not paying attention to it, because there's an energy associated with it. And when you begin to hear people's conversation, I mean, really listen for their conversations when there is a setback. It tends to be a downward energetic spiral. What was wrong? Who broke it? Who's to blame? You start, all that kind of stuff starts to come into play here. If you can begin to reframe how you're seeing an obstacle, first of all, the obstacle becomes the way to this worthy ideal. It wouldn't exist unless you were on that pathway. That obstacle would not exist unless you were not on that pathway.
Yep.
So, one way to think about it is, this is an unexpected opportunity. It's not a setback, it's an unexpected opportunity. And that notion can completely change the way that people engage with that problem. The problem with most problems isn't the problem itself, it's the problem that people have with the problem.
Yeah.
If
There you
that
go.
makes
Write that
sense.
one out.
Yeah. I have a problem with the problem. Well, let's let the problem be what it is, but let's look at the problem you're having with the problem. That's a
Right.
relationship. And it's usually a relationship that's, steeped in mindset, that has to do with identity. I'm not the kind of person who would have, or I'm not the kind of person who could. I mean, that's the problem I have with the problem, is it puts me right up against myself. It puts us right against ourselves as a team. We've never done this before. So that's the problem I'm having with the problem of we've never done this before. So how do we do that? Well,
Yeah.
the problem will take care of itself. It wouldn't exist if it wasn't on the pathway.
Yeah. The next one is emotional agility. And Elaine, you said something you touched on something that's really cool. And that is we have people looking to us for guidance. We have when we are as we think of the flow of all of these together, when we reframe setbacks, opportunities, strategic insight, when we're thinking about that's a mindset, reframing is a mindset. And managing the emotional agility is that opportunity for you to it's that self-regulate piece. That's a very important piece because a lot of times not only does the opportunity to be in a situation requiring resilience have to reframe your thinking, but you also tend to you can as a leader have a tendency to think negatively about yourself because I let them down. I didn't do exactly everything I said I was going to do. It didn't go the way, and I should have known. There's a old redneck saying, "I coulda, woulda, shoulda," that lives inside of the body of this sentence. So when you're building awareness, and we'll get into this in a worksheet here in just a few minutes, but when you're building awareness, just be aware. And Blaine mentioned this yesterday. Notice what you're noticing. Notice that moment.
Yep.
Anything you want to add to that, Mr.
Well,
Bartlett, before we go on to?
just the conversation, just a real quick tidbit on emotional intelligence, because that's essentially what we're doing here with emotional agility. I mean,
Yeah.
we're always going to have emotions, feelings. That's always going to be in place here. How do I use them is part of the question here. How do I
Yes.
use them? And I want to be generative in my use of disappointment, as an example. I want to be generative in the use of that. Again, it has an energetic associated with it. So I want to be able to master how I'm using and deploying the energy associated with the emotions. And that can make a big difference. I remember years ago when I was running personal development programs back in the 1970s. I had come in as a new regional director in the Southern California region for this company. And this particular area that we were working in, they had, and I won't bore you with all the details here, but we sold personal development programs. And so numbers, how many butts were in the seat? How many people do we have involved? Or was part of the game. And this
Yeah.
particular city had never broken the 100 person threshold. So one of the very first things I did when I came in as the new leader here was we're gonna do 100 people. We're gonna set that as our target, okay? And that was the objective. Well, fast forward here, long story short, everybody was in just really working it. We hit 99. We hit 99. We did not hit 100. And the next, every Monday morning we would have a call with, all the regions in the United States would get together on a conference call. And I remember the CEO talking about, they said they were going to do 100, they hit 99. Boy, did they screw up. Boy, did they screw up. Now, it was an enormous win, just on its surface, but the fixation on the outcome, not on what had happened, the emotional agility, his disappointment in not hitting the number, and us not hitting the number, literally cascaded over my entire team. And it took us another 6 months to dig out of that hole. And just to kind of get people, back in place again here. So
Yeah.
we have impact. There's a ripple that occurs out there. And I wasn't astute enough, I wasn't mature enough, and I was naive enough to not know how to buffer what he was saying and keep my team protected. And which was something that I learned as as part and parcel of that whole experience. But that's one way that we can begin to appreciate the use of emotion, the use of this. There's an energy involved. Is it uplifting or is it dispiriting? And dispiriting, and I'm very specific way of using that word, it cuts off access to spirit.
Yeah.
Okay. So, resilience circle. You're not going to do this by yourself. That's when you start working with mindset. Our eyes look out, our ears, all of our sensory data is collected by looking outward, listening outward. I mean, all of that stuff. So we really don't have a chance to look at ourselves particularly well. This is why self-assessments oftentimes don't work particularly well when we're looking at
Right.
developing people. They think that they're much better than they actually are. And sometimes they think that they're much worse than they actually are. So having a resilience circle, we can call this a mastermind group or whatever it is, but you need to have people that are signed up with you with your best interest in heart saying, let me tell you what I'm seeing here. Let me tell you what I'm noticing. Yeah. And also, you just fell down. Let me encourage you so you can get back up. I mean, all of that comes into play here.
Yeah.
So, and the net of it is, as a leader, you're not in this by yourself. Yeah. Get a couple of trusted confederates that can actually be your support network, however that might look for you.
And there's a practical thing that you can do this. So you're this we treat this 5-day challenge as a mastermind. That's why we ask questions and you get a say, and it's not just Blaine and I talking at you for 5 days, although it feels like it sometimes. Um, but from a on this particular item, one of the things that you can do within your organization, regardless of the size of the organization, is there are people that you meet with and that you have conversations with, and they're a component of your resilience circle. But keep a rule. And one of the rules that I use all of the time in any organization I've ever led is, look, if I'm meeting with 3 people on a consistent basis, and those 3 people always agree with me, I'm going to go get 3 other people.
Yep. Yep.
because one of the components of having in a resilient circle is that opportunity to challenge ourselves properly. Don't tell me I'm short and overweight. Challenge ourselves properly in our thinking so that we are accountable to each other from that perspective. And then
Yeah.
make adaptation. The last piece through this flow piece from your mindset as a leader is resilient leaders. We know that it's a continuous path. Blaine talked about the definition of success a little while ago. Make sure that you create space, which is difficult for us to do. Create space, put it in your calendar. Create thinking space, create an opportunity for you to think through resilience, to understand solutions and situations and circumstances. Give yourself that opportunity in your calendar. We have a tendency to, when we end up with air in our calendar, to fill it with do
Mm-hmm.
or manage.
Yeah.
Create some space. There's a really great book out there called The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham, which is all about thinking space. It's an opportunity to make adaptation that daily practice. Give yourself room and be okay with that.
Now, one of the things around this daily practice notion is an understanding of how mindset actually gets developed.
Yeah,
Mindset is
good point.
developed. We're really talking here about values and belief systems, mostly belief system, belief structures, belief systems. They get developed through repetition.
Yep.
That's how it happens. It gets developed through repetition. I do this, I see this outcome, I start to believe that this, there's a cause effect correlation here. When this happens, it means this, and this is gonna. So all of that stuff, goes back into the background, into the subconscious, and it operates. It's just running. But it was developed through repetition, through repetition. So our daily, and Dolan mentioned your calendar. One of the greatest tools you've got is to disrupt your calendar. I mean, truly, disrupt your calendar. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes habits. And most of us got up on the same side of the bed this morning as we did yesterday. We grabbed the toothbrush with the same hand that we grabbed it with yesterday. We got the favorite cup of coffee, favorite cup for our coffee. And if that cup wasn't available, we went over and we washed it so that we would have it, so that we could use it. Habits are the ways that we develop mindset. So the ways that you begin to shift mindset is to interrupt existing patterns, interrupt existing habits. Yeah, my in Bob, I'm going to mention Bob here. Dolan and
I
I,
do.
knew Bob really well. Bob Proctor, one of my best friends. He used to give an assignment in programs he did to take this, a little small little paragraph of words. He said, I want you to practice for the next 30 days writing that paragraph every day with your non-dominant hand. So if you're right-handed, you write it with your left hand. And
Yeah.
he's not interested in legibility. He's looking to interrupt the neuronal activity in the brain. When you start interrupting something, and you can do this with toothbrush, brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand, and you'll see that your head starts going up and down instead of your hand moving. But it interrupts the
True.
patterns. It interrupts the patterns. And when you interrupt the pattern, something newly possible can land. And that's how you actually introduce change into an organization is you interrupt the pattern way of being, thinking, doing. You interrupt a pattern, it makes possible something else to come into play. And that's what we want to be able to do here. And that's what, adaptation makes possible.
Yeah. So on that thought, we'll talk about the mindset of a resilient team. These are
Yeah.
indicators. A lot of these lead these are indicators, symptoms, I think we call it. Blaine and I do this thing every Thursday called The Power of You for an hour. And we talk about symptoms. Here's things you can see that are symptoms. And we'll go through this relatively quickly because otherwise we'll be here for a long time today. But it is that, when from the mindset of the team, things to watch for is that they remain focused under pressure. The importance with that is clarity and momentum. Remember the definition of leadership, co-creating coordinated movement. That clarity and momentum, because leaders cause movement. We cause things to move. So when we're looking at the mindset of the team, we're looking for those indicators. So even when challenges escalate, when things change, because they're going to change, it is that installation process as you're co-creating. There are steps that you can take. There are tactical things that Blaine and I talk about in the mastermind around questions you can ask. What possibly are we not thinking about? What are we not seeing? What things could occur? So make sure that when you're evaluating the team, you're looking for a mindset that they're staying focused through the pressure. It's a natural tendency for people to make up their own stories when there's not clarity. So it's an opportunity to recreate that moment. Mr. Bartley, you want to do the next one?
Yeah, and embracing change proactively. Again, this kind of goes all the way back to at a personal level. What's the unexpected opportunity that that this thing is producing for us? It didn't go the way we wanted, but proactively has embedded in it. We can do something with this. I have agency. We can. How do we use this to get us closer to what we said we wanted to have, that worthy ideal? How do we use this? Which is a different question than how do we solve this?
Yes.
And I really want to make that distinction. How we solve it is about getting rid of it. When we're looking at that worthy idea, how do we use this? Because it presents an opportunity here to think differently, to behave differently, perhaps, to bring somebody else in that we hadn't thought about that may be conducive to where it is that we're going. So just that little shift in mindset, can create some very interesting resource access that I may not have noticed before.
Yeah.
And the way that works in with owning outcomes and accountability, just I'll take this one and pass it over to
Yeah.
you.
By all
Is
means. It's well rehearsed.
that whole notion of the for the sake of what? When you keep that in place as the focal point, because the tendency will be when the obstacle appears to have the focus shift. The focus is shifting to we've got a problem, we better solve the problem, as opposed to we've got an unexpected opportunity here. How does it serve this objective that we say that we're striving for, this worthy ideal that we're moving towards? How can we
Right.
leverage that? So you end up making different solutions, coming up with different solutions to how you deal with this, quote unquote problem than what you've done before. And there's a whole conversation around problem solving that is fascinating to jump into that we don't have time here for today.
Yeah.
But it's a really interesting deep dive when you
Another
start
5-day challenge.
marrying the problem with the worthy ideal. When you can get, you end up becoming a problem causer, not a problem solver.
Yeah.
And I'm going to just kind of plant that seed because we can explore it later.
Yeah.
So open communication and constructively working.
I'll give you one practical example. You as a leader, would you're looking for the mindset in your team that they're willing to communicate. We talked about the 4 pillars: trust, autonomy is the willingness for people to try. Communication is that willingness to be able to communicate, to be candid, right? There's this thing called radical candor, for people to be candid and have a conversation with you. Both Blaine and I have podcasts. Blaine's called Soul of Business. Mine's called The Next Interview. And I recently had an opportunity to interview a gentleman who was hired by the United States government to work with the leadership of NASA to determine why the Challenger exploded. And the Challenger, you work with and there was a 3-ring circle whenever they had meetings talking about go, no go for missions. And the inner circle was the generals, admirals, flight commanders, all of that stuff. The next circle around that was those people taking notes. And the third circle were the engineers who knew that the O-ring was going to fail. And the engineers who lived in that third circle weren't given permission to offer feedback through the meeting. And
Yeah.
the short nub of that was one sentence that became a policy. Does anyone else have an opinion? In the meeting, which is that opportunity. So you're looking for that opportunity from a not team's mindset perspective, and we're on the hook to grant that permission and create that element of trust. for people to be able to communicate openly and constructively, so that they're contributing to the conversation. And
Yeah.
that's a difficult thing to do. It's difficult for people to live into that because we're trained with punitive thoughts sometimes.
Yeah, so part of that, from a trust perspective, is when you open up, does anybody else have an opinion on this? You have to trust yourself to be able to handle somebody voicing a counter argument and potentially derailing where you were going, particularly if that counter argument is valid. It's kind of like, oh, I had not thought about that. Tell me
Right,
more. Yeah. And
right.
that vulnerability, and this is where authenticity gets to be really interesting, as a leadership trait. Being willing to and communicate that I'm willing to listen. I'm still going to make the decision. But you give me the data and I'll consider it. And you shape people's listening so that they can hear that you're actually inviting that.
Yeah. Somebody's got to call the ball. So
Yep.
we'll go on to let's talk a little bit about this. Mr. Bartlett, do you want to talk about flow?
Yeah, all of this conspires. I mean, most of us have heard about the nature of flow. Being in the zone is how it's described usually in the sports world. But it's when everything's just kind of working. I've done an awful lot of whitewater rafting. I've rafted in Russia, Central America, Japan. Yeah, I mean, I've rafted, in a lot of places. And in these rivers, there's a seam, the current. Yeah, you can see it. It's always present in some way, shape, or form. But where the current is moving, you can actually kind of mark it out. Every now and then there's a back eddy. Yeah, particularly if there's boulders and stuff in the water. Flow has to do with being in that seam or adjacent to or close by that seam, where it becomes actually effortless in many ways to move down the river. There's an effortless efforting that kind of comes into play here, to use a Sufi phrase. But it's not about forcing outcome. It's about removing resistance. So if we notice that we're in a backwater eddy, so to speak, this
Huh.
is where some of the stuff we were talking about on some of these other two slides comes into play here. Yeah, mindset. What's keeping us caught in this eddy? It's our thinking that's keeping us caught in this eddy. Our preference for doing things right rather than looking at what's working, not working. So those sorts of things come into play here. So we're looking, and this is actually one metric that we can use in an organization is there the experience that we're in flow present with us? Does it seem, even though we're dealing with big things, does it seem easy? Yeah. And it's not that there's not sweat involved. It's not that there's not effort involved,
Right.
but does it seem easy? That's an indication that from a mindset perspective, you're working well. And from a resilience perspective, you're actually in front of the game. Okay. So cultivating flow as a process is about aligning intention, attention, and action. And that's what the previous slides were really kind of speaking to. And that's what the 4 pillars actually facilitate.
Yeah.
Aligning intention, attention, and action to create a state of seamless productivity. Energy follows attention, not intention.
Yeah.
Squirrel. Yeah, squirrel. Yeah. Yeah. So we
Yeah.
get distracted. Keep people focused. Yeah, here's our intention, and here's where
Excuse me.
our attention goes. The problem with the problem keeps us in the eddy, keeps us in the backwater.
Yeah.
So that's what flow's about. It's a way
So
to assess how well are we doing here.
yeah, so this is so we wanted to just brief we'll touch on this. I'm going to share a worksheet with you here in just a moment or two, just as this is
Yeah.
an introduction kind of to that conversation. And we're at 9:56. We're going to go a little longer than 10 a.m. today. We'll make sure everybody's good with that. Probably about 10 after or so we'll
Yeah.
wrap up just a skosh,
Very Elaine, just a skosh, just a skosh.
just a tiny bit.
And
I'll put my
if you have to drop out oh, by the way, the recordings, and I'm, at 10 o'clock, I will put a link in the chat to the video recordings for the sessions that we're doing.
right. So in flow, mindset shifts that create team. Again, we're leading for in pursuit of a worthy ideal. So when we're looking for indicators, right, we're looking for indicators for team flow that create team flow. which is from control to trust. It is that co-creating, coordinated movement to empower the team with autonomy. Autonomy is trust. It's that willingness to try, and your willingness to trust that it's not, they're going to do it their way, not your way, because we're all, it's, leadership is this cool thing. It's a team sport. Speaking of hockey, and flow thrives when individuals, they feel trusted, not micromanaged. I don't know. I hope you probably all have been in organizations. And I don't know if any of you have ever been micromanaged before. I have.
Yep.
I have youngest son who's being micromanaged to death at work right now. And the impact on his performance, job performance, I'm watching his job performance diminish over time through his attitude and words and coaching with him. So there's that moment. Fear of mistakes, learning fast, right? Encourage experimentation. What could we do? What can we do? Again, what are we not seeing?
Yeah.
Again, when we think of flow, it's very tightly coupled when we're talking about resilience.
Yeah, and you think about this, if I could just real quick here.
Yeah, no, by all means,
Leadership,
go.
leadership puts us into unknown territory. And because it's
All the
unknown
time.
territory, we don't know the safe path to get from point A to point B.
Mhm.
So it's a minefield out there. We're going to step on stuff and it's going to blow up in our face sometimes. Honda Sorichiro, who is the founder of the Honda Motor Company, mentioned one
Yeah.
time when he was asked in an interview, "What's the secret to your success?" Because he was really kind of an unusual Japanese businessman. He was unusual, but he said it's pretty simple. I made as many mistakes as I could, as fast as I could. I made as many mistakes as I could, as fast as I could.
Yeah.
And embedded in that was I learned from them, and we learned from them. So yeah, it wasn't a mistake. It was a learning opportunity. And this is a mindset. This is a mindset shift. Mindset is somebody screwed up. That's a mistake. Somebody screwed up, something screwed up. Learning opportunity. Yeah, you heard about that. But it's, how do we learn the safe path? How do we learn how to get from point A to point B? We've never done it before. Well, mistakes are going to give us a whole lot of indications.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway,
Yep.
we could spend a lot, we could continue on with that. So one of the things that again, kind of in the two bullets together really combined together, is stay agile. Agile means you're willing to adapt to change quickly. And I think when we think about, there's an agile methodology, right? When we think about Scrum and in the Agile methodology, there's a thing called a stand-up, and only three things get asked. The very first question is, what did we do yesterday? The next question is, what are we doing today? And the third question is, there we go. There's my balloons. I got too many fingers going. And the last question is, what are our roadblocks? So that we can move quickly and do so quickly and recognize where we are and refine strategies in flow.
Yep.
We're not refining, we're not waiting to the bitter, we're refining strategies because conditions will change on that daily basis. And the last bullet it's very, very important that shared for the sake of what? There is a shared worthy ideal that becomes very important when the team is in flow. And just from a tactical, practical standpoint, one of the key things that comes out of there are words that we say that set an emotional state. And the words that we say, when we say I, me, mine, we set a singular state. When we say us, we, them, we take co-ownership. So when we're speaking words around creating clarity and role, and we're working together as a team, we're focused on the us, we, them, not the I, me, my. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Cool. Okay. Whew,
Worksheet.
that's a lot.
That's the lesson. That's the
That's
lesson
that's
today.
our lesson. But I'm
But
gonna stop. I'm gonna
wait,
stop sharing.
there's more.
But wait, if you call 1-800. Oh, I'm sorry. Um,
By Popeil.
yes. So in the chat, I'm gonna hit go in the chat. Let me get back to chat. And I lost my chat. Where did my chat go? Hang on. Come back to chat. and hit go in chat. There's a document, there's a worksheet that we created that you can use, and there's another worksheet coming right behind this that will be homework for everybody. But this worksheet gives you an opportunity to stop and think through from a flow perspective. Where am I in personal awareness and centering? Pause and reflect, maintaining my presence. Am I prioritizing my self-care? It's that we've all been on the airplane where it says, put your oxygen mask on first. Did I put my oxygen mask on? Monitoring your energy, aligning intentions, facilitating flow with your team, creating trust, establishing psychological safety, which is fundamentally saying being authentic, creating trust, create an environment where team members can feel safe to share ideas, removing obstacles to flow, encouraging adaptability and innovation, reviewing and realigning regular. The intention behind the worksheet is to give you a framework to think through. It's kind of like that leadership checklist that we went through yesterday around the ACT model, but it's a flow state measure for you to evaluate self, team, outcome, communication. Comments,
And
Blaine?
yeah, well, no, just I think that's very self-explanatory. And then the worksheet that goes along with that, that information that you generate there actually dumps into and will inform how you fill out the worksheet.
Which happens to be in the chat as we speak at the
Ta-da!
moment. Ta-da-da. And in the worksheet, it's an opportunity, and I'll just share my screen briefly for everybody. This is our homework assignment for tonight. We're going to start tomorrow with this. But in the worksheet, it's an opportunity. I'm going to pardon the fast scroll. I apologize for scrolling down quickly. I've worked with a couple of people that said, it gives me vertigo. Just bear with me. But it's an opportunity to look at, as you think through resilience, it's an opportunity to ask yourself, what potential events could impact my business? Sam, you're in startup mode. Armin, you're leading tens of people I was talking to my wife about you this morning, Armin. Sorry to tell you that. But we were talking specifically about what you're doing to lead ecological change, to reinstate natural environments. Why would these things impact? So it's an opportunity for you to evaluate them, to think through them, and possibly also use this when you're creating strategy. And we'll talk about strategy and plans tomorrow as a component of that process. So this is our homework for tonight. Mr. Bartlett, did I share my screen properly? I probably didn't.
No, you got your desktop showing up
Oh,
there.
what the hell?
Okay, don't worry about it. Then the
Don't,
PDF is in there and they can open it up.
thank
Uh,
God I'm a pro.
yeah, no kidding. Yeah, don't try this at home, folks.
There we go. Now I shared it.
There
Good
you
thing I'm a
go.
pro. You got to
That's
see
what
my
it looks like.
American flags on my screen there. There you go.
There you go. So that's the worksheet. Just again, first thought, best thought. You're going to get this is just to stimulate your thinking in part, because by the time we get to Friday, we're going to be giving you this 30-day plan. And all of this, your top level notes on these worksheets will begin to inform how you actually, complete that 30-day plan for yourself.
Yeah.
And it'll be a great reference. In the chat, there is a YouTube link.
I think you probably have to redo it because it was in there before everybody got here.
Okay. Okay, let me do it again. Let's see here. I just put it up a little bit ago, but I will grab it again.
There we
One
go.
more time with feeling.
There we
Okay,
go. I've got it if you don't.
I got it here. Let's see.
Okay.
Bum, bum, bum. There we go. YouTube link. That's where we're keeping all of the YouTubes from the daily sessions for the challenge. So the first 2 days are already up there. Today's will go up. It'll probably be there, right around noon this afternoon, Pacific time.
We can only hope.
We
Yeah.
can only hope. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's unedited. It's just the raw video. So we didn't put bells and whistles on it. But feel free to grab it and review it and fast forward, pause it, look at it again, whatever you want to do with it. It's all
There you
there.
go. There
Okay.
you go.
And we'll see you guys tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Pacific time.
Before we go, Sam, I saw your hand up. Did you have something did you have a question or something you want to ask?
I know I accidentally had clicked the button to put it up, but thank you.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you to the both of you. This is so grateful taking the time to do this. Thank you.
Oh, it's our
Yeah,
pleasure.
we have fun doing this. We do these about every 6 weeks, these challenges. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. And as you can tell, it's very well rehearsed. I mean, we got this thing wired. All
We're
right.
always making stuff up.
Exactly. We'll see everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow. Thank you for being here. Toda-san, Armin, have a great night.
Arigato.
Everybody
right.
have a great day.
Thank you. See you,
Take care,
everybody.
guys.
Bye.